Sonic Lab
TV.
Hello, welcome to the last instalment of our Behringer X32 review. It's been a bit of a whopper, but that's because there's so much to it. For part one, click here, and part two, click here. Now today we're looking at the peripherals. Now this is the S16, this is the AES50, which is a Cat5 network cable connected stage box with 16 in and 8 outputs. There's more to it than that. And it all hooks up via a single network cable rather than the old school way of multi-core, and allows you to connect remote sources, have inputs and outputs coming to the X32. This is a standard Cat5 network cable. You do get ones which have got special armatures like an XLR cannon on the back, which make them a bit posher, but it will work up to 100-meter runs of just basic Cat5 cable. Now, in the olden days, you'd have these multi-cores which would have, you know, huge amounts of pairs of audio, and they would just weigh an absolute ton. So this kind of thing not only means you don't have to carry much stuff around, but it saves on shipping costs if you're moving PAs around the place. So what is the S16? Well, I've got it here on my rotating cake stand. Essentially, it's a 2-unit rack mount system with 16 Midas powered mic line inputs. They're all on XLR, so if you want to plug in lines, you're going to need to get DI boxes for those. It's also got 8 XLR outputs, which you can configure to be however you want. In fact, in the diagrams, it says you could actually run it so that you can have maybe left and right, front of house, plus 4 self-powered monitors. So you could have a 4-way monitor mix plus a left and right output just using this system, and 16 returns coming back over a single Cat5 cable. Now, just to clarify, it's not just a stage box. There are actually 16 mic preamps inside the stage box itself, which you control remotely via the X32. So it's not just like having a load of multi-core, it's actually got a bit of brains to it as well. But it is totally possible to control the unit via the front panel. If I go to channel, say, 8, and I press gain, I can now adjust the mic amp gain as I wish from the front panel. I can also switch on the phantom power, which is indicated by this red LED. There's also the possibility of monitoring via headphones. We've got a dedicated headphone output, and repeated pressing of this tells you what you're actually monitoring. So for instance, if I press to ins, then I can monitor any of the inputs, I can monitor any of the outputs, I can monitor any of the AES input or outputs, or I can monitor any of the P16 monitor channels. The thing that's very cool about that is it means if you're on stage and you kind of think, oh my God, what's that terrible noise? It's very quick for somebody to kind of just dial it in and listen to it. Or perhaps you might want to run it on a feedback system, a foldback system, and I could run the Talkback mic from the front of house to say, you know, can you check mic, the kick drum mic, or move it, or whatever. It just enables bidirectional control outside of just the straight channel. So it's actually really handy. You also get metering on the selected channel, which again is very handy for debugging line or mic inputs, you know, particularly in a live situation where everything can be a bit chaotic. Now, all I have to do to plug this in is take an AES50 cable, plug it in the back here, and if you look, it just has connected. It says on network A is S16 plugged in, and that's it. And what that means is that now over that one wire, I've got access to the 16 mic inputs plus 8 sends back to the stage box, plus another 16 via the ADAT 1 and 2 outputs. So now if I go to my routing, I've got my inputs can be chosen from all the available inputs at AES50. I'm going to take channel 17 blocks 1 to 8 from AES50 channels 1 to 8. So now if I go to channel 17 and I push the gain button and start tweaking the input gain, you can see that it's reflected on the front panel. Output routing is just the same. I can assign outputs 1 to 8 are the ones that come on the front of the unit, so I can take that signal from 1 to 8, local 9 to 16, local channel outputs or AES outputs, A or B buses or card outputs or the P16 monitoring system or my AUXes 1 to 8. So now all of those inputs and outputs become available to me as the stage box. And this is really handy. I mean, not just for live, just imagine in a studio. I had like one of these in every room, Cat5 going between them all. I've just got amazing routing potential. I can do pretty much whatever I want, plug whatever I want in. If I had 2 of these units hooked up or more, I could have everything plugged in all at the same time and just patch everything in the desk rather than actually having a patch bay. So some very powerful options there. So the other situation that I can see coming up is where you might have, say, two X32 desks, if you're lucky enough to own both, one running front of house and one running the monitors, but you want to access the same channels. Now, because of the way that it's structured, it's a little bit different to the way some systems work, which would access the same set of inputs and just have completely independent control. The way that you would do that if you wanted to run it this way is like this. You go to your routing setup, and whatever you were running, and say if you had your stage boxes on AES50A, you might have, I don't know, say two or three of them, so you have 32 inputs coming here, and you would route them to AES50B. So all of your outputs in groups of 8 would come from your AES50A. So effectively that way, either your front of house or your monitors are in charge of the mic amps. It can't be a mix and match or both. So therefore what you would have to do is you have to trust that whoever is in charge of the mic amps is not going to get any clipping. The person at the other end who's just getting the feeds also has plus or minus 12 dB of digital gain on top of the signal, but they can't stop any clipping going on. So it's not necessarily perfect, but it's still very workable. We should also take a look at the additional routing possibilities, because it's not just about analog and AES50. If I go to the unit here, we can see we've got these pair of ADAT ports. Now these are 16 outputs, 2 ports, output only, and as the unit comes, just switched on standard stage box mode, they represent AES outputs 17 to 32. Obviously the first 8 of the AES outputs are mapped to these 8 analog. So we've got 8 plus an additional 16. So we can get 24 outputs from the S16 if we're using the ADAT ports. If you go into a splitter mode, what these will also do is mirror these 16 inputs. So you could run it as a recording system. So if you have, say, a laptop on stage or somewhere off to the side, you could be recording the 16 discrete mic amps into a DAW or some such thing. And don't forget too that we've also got Midi I/O on the back of the S16, so you could have somebody remotely triggering maybe scene changes in the console via a sequencer that they're running on stage, or foot switch, or any of those kind of things too. So lots of I/O capabilities all running down that single one wire. There's also an additional port on the back of the S16, which is the Ultranet port. The Ultranet port is, again, another Cat5 cable, and this is an additional set of 16 monitor buses that allow you to have 16 I/O into a monitoring system. This is the P16M, which is essentially a 16-channel mixer, which can take 16 inputs from the monitor sends, which can be configured any way you want. So they could be input channels, they could be effects returns, they could be Talkback, they could be auxiliary buses, subgroups, whatever, however you want to configure it. Looking at the overhead here, it's a very simple operation. You can select channels or pairs of channels or groups of channels just by basically switching any one of these 16 inputs. You can store settings into any of these 16 locations. You can group channels, and you basically, once it's selected, you've got a little 3-band EQ, the swept mid, you've got pan, you've got volume, then you've got an overall output level and also a limiter, so you can really sort of dial down the dynamic range if it's causing you problems, or if you just want to squash something because you like the way it sounds. And you can imagine if you, say, had a drummer, or you were using in-ears, you could have a few of these dotted about the place, as well as wedges by configuring it however you wanted. Maybe the drummer could work off a power play, have a click coming through it. Lots and lots of ways to configure that. And remember, all of this is running off single Cat5 cable coming into the unit via AES50. Then we can take the Ultranet out on a single wire. So I think these peripherals do add quite a lot of substance to what I'm already very impressed with the X32 system, but this Cat5 networking and the remote audio side of things, it just works really nicely. I mean, the S16 isn't possibly the cheapest component. It's around about 999 euros, 750 UK pounds. Dollars should scroll below. That's obviously full list. You're probably going to get it quite a bit cheaper online or in the store. I mean, it would have been nice on the S16 to have some digital input so that we could clock it externally and then use it in a studio system with our existing equipment, and unfortunately that's just not available yet. There may well be other peripherals and AES50 devices that come along that allow that, but it's just not happening just yet. As far as the power play mix system goes as well, This again is incredibly cheap. For the PowerPlay P16M, which I've got here, it's about 129 quid. Other currencies will scroll below. So again, you know, if you need one or two systems, maybe if you're a band and you're thinking we want to get our own front of house system, get the whole thing on the road, just show up, just plug into the speakers. This could provide you with something that's compact and will just fit the bill. So this really just sort of completes the picture for me. I'm sold on the X32. It's a desk that I enjoy using. I can see the potential for it. I think it's well built, well thought out, well designed, and these peripherals kind of complete the picture for me. Really, it's just a question of you know, whether it suits your particular needs and requirements. But I think Behringer have done a fantastic job here, and it's going to be hard to beat at this price.